The Kethmoran Armada stretched across the void like a steel plague, their obsidian hulls drinking in starlight as millions of vessels carved through space in perfect formation. For 3,000 years, they had swept through galaxy after galaxy, leaving nothing but ash and broken worlds in their wake. Entire civilizations had risen and fallen in the time it took their massive fleet to cross from one spiral arm to another. Admiral Vexthal stood on the command bridge of the flagship Worldrender, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he gazed out at the tactical display. Red dots marked conquered systems, stretching back in an unbroken line across 17 galaxies. Each dot represented billions of lives extinguished, countless species reduced to footnotes in the Armada's glorious march toward universal dominion. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The bridge crew, a mixture of conquered species serving their new masters, hurried to comply. "Sir, advanced scouts report successful pacification of the Andorian cluster," reported Lieutenant Zektar, a reptilian humanoid whose own homeworld had fallen 2 centuries ago. "All resistance eliminated. Industrial capacity being integrated into our supply lines." Vexthal's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Andorians had been particularly troublesome, their energy-based weaponry proving more effective than most against Kethmoran armor. But in the end, superior numbers and tactical doctrine had prevailed, as they always did. "Excellent. And our next target?" "The Milky Way galaxy, sir. Long-range probes indicate a diverse collection of species, most still confined to their home systems. The local dominant military force appears to be something called the Terran Federation, centered around a species that calls itself human." Vexthal's 6 eyes studied the holographic display showing their target galaxy. It looked unremarkable, a standard spiral formation with the usual distribution of stars and habitable worlds. The intelligence reports suggested a typical collection of young civilizations, barely past their industrial phases. It would fall within a standard year, perhaps less if the humans proved as weak as most carbon-based life forms. "Deploy the Vanguard fleets," he ordered. "Standard pacification protocol. We'll give them the usual opportunity to surrender before we demonstrate the futility of resistance." As the order rippled through the massive fleet, thousands of vessels began to shift course toward the distant spiral of light that was the Milky Way. The Kethmoran war machine moved with the inexorable patience of a force that had never known defeat. Meanwhile, in a quiet star system on the outer edge of their target galaxy, Captain Sarachin sat in her ready room aboard the exploration vessel Defiant, reviewing routine patrol reports. The ship was one of Terran Federation's newer designs, built for long-range exploration and scientific research rather than warfare. At only 300 meters long, it was dwarfed by the massive battleships of the Federation Navy, but it was fast, well-shielded, and equipped with the latest in human technology. Sarah had been commanding deep space missions for 15 years, ever since graduating from the Academy on Earth. Her crew of 200 was handpicked, the best and brightest that humanity had to offer. They had discovered 17 new worlds, made first contact with 6 alien species, and pushed the boundaries of human knowledge further into the unknown than any previous expedition. "Captain," came the voice of her science officer, Dr. James Park, over the intercom. "You need to see this. We're detecting some kind of massive gravitational disturbance at the edge of sensor range." Sarah set down her coffee and made her way to the bridge. The Defiance Command Center was compact but efficient, with holographic displays providing real-time data about their surroundings. Dr. Park was hunched over his console, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. "What have you found, Doctor?" "It's unlike anything in our databases, Captain. The gravitational signature suggests an artificial structure of enormous size moving through hyperspace. The mass readings are, well, they're impossible. Whatever it is, it's bigger than some of the gas giants we've cataloged." Sarah frowned as she studied the data. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Some kind of dark matter formation? "Negative, ma'am. The movement pattern is too regular, too purposeful. This is definitely artificial. And Captain, Park's voice dropped to a whisper. There are thousands of them, maybe hundreds of thousands. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah had read the intelligence reports about the mysterious signals detected from other galaxies, the radio transmissions that had suddenly gone dark across vast regions of space. The xenobiologists had theorized about the possibility of aggressive expansion of species, but it had always seemed like a distant concern. How long until they reach our galaxy? She asked. Park consulted his instruments. At their current velocity, approximately 6 months. But, Captain, if they maintain their formation, they'll enter through the outer spiral arm. That puts them directly in the path of the Proxima colonies. Sarah's blood ran cold. Proxima Centauri housed over 50 million civilians, including her own sister's family. If these unknown contacts were hostile, those people would be sitting ducks. Communications, send an immediate priority message to Fleet Command. Full sensor data, maximum encryption. Tell them we have a potential code black scenario developing. As her communications officer began transmitting the warning back to Earth, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their peaceful exploration mission was about to become something far more dangerous. She had no way of knowing that the approaching fleet had already conquered 17 galaxies, or that her small ship would soon stand as the only thing between humanity and complete annihilation. The Defiant continued its patrol, its crew unaware that in the depths of space, Admiral Vexthal was already planning the conquest of their entire species. The Kethmoran armada pressed forward through the void, confident in their inevitable victory. But, hidden in the quantum heart of the human ship, experimental technologies that even the Terran Federation didn't fully understand hummed with potential. Dr. Park's gravitational sensors were only one of several prototype systems aboard the Defiant, technologies that had been developed in secret laboratories and tested only in computer simulations. Humanity was about to face its greatest test, and neither species understood just how unprecedented the coming battle would be. The Kethmoran had conquered galaxies through superior numbers and conventional tactics, but they had never faced a species quite like humanity. And humanity had never needed to defend against anything more than pirates and border disputes. As the two forces moved inexorably toward their first contact, the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, unknowing that a single ship and its crew would soon determine the future of galactic civilization itself. 6 months later, the first Kethmoran scout fleets burst into the Milky Way like a plague of metal locusts. Their arrival was heralded not by fanfare, but by the sudden silence of outer colony communications as world after world went dark. Admiral Vexthal watched from his command, thrown as reports flooded in from his advanced forces. The humans had responded exactly as expected. Their military fleets had mobilized, their planets had activated defensive systems, and their leaders had transmitted the usual desperate pleas for negotiation. It was a pattern he had witnessed countless times before. The human response is surprisingly organized, reported his tactical coordinator, studying the holographic battle displays. They've managed to coordinate their scattered fleets faster than most species at their technological level. Irrelevant, Vexthal replied dismissively. Numbers will tell. How many vessels do they possess? Approximately 40,000 combat-capable ships across their entire federation, sir. Mostly light cruisers and destroyers. Their largest vessels mass approximately 1/10 of our smallest battleships. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Kethmoran armada fielded over 3 million vessels, each one a masterpiece of destructive engineering. The humans might as well try to stop a tsunami with fishing nets. Proceed with standard doctrine. Overwhelming force at every engagement. I want this galaxy pacified within one standard cycle. As the massive alien fleet spread throughout human space like a cancer, the Terran Federation found itself facing a horror beyond imagination. Admiral Rachel Torres stood in the command center of Fleet Headquarters on Luna, watching helplessly as red indicators marked the loss of system after system. Proxima Centauri has gone silent, reported her aide, his voice hollow with exhaustion. They had been fighting for 3 months without pause, and every battle brought nothing but casualties and retreat. Casualties? Torres asked, though she dreaded the answer. Complete loss of contact. 52 million civilians. The 7th Fleet made it there in time to evacuate maybe 100,000 before. He didn't need to finish. Torres closed her eyes and tried to push down the rage and grief that threatened to overwhelm her tactical thinking. The aliens fought with a cold efficiency that spoke of vast experience. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics refined by millennia of conquest. Humanity's technological advantages in computing and energy manipulation couldn't overcome such overwhelming numerical superiority. What about the experimental vessels? Any word from Project Aegis? The aide consulted his reports. The Defiant is still operational, last reported position in the Tau Ceti system. Captain Chen's ship has been conducting hit-and-run attacks against isolated alien formations. They've actually managed to destroy several enemy vessels, but it's barely a dent in their overall numbers. Torres nodded grimly. The Defiant had been refitted with every experimental technology that Federation scientists could squeeze into its hull. Quantum resonance shields, gravitic pulse weapons, enhanced AI targeting systems, and something called a dimensional phase shifter that the physicists claimed could theoretically move matter between parallel quantum states. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, crewed by their best personnel, and it was probably their last hope. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiant, studying the tactical display with grim determination. Her ship had been running silent for 6 hours, hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, while a Kethmoran fleet passed overhead. The enemy formation included over 200 vessels, each one larger than Earth's mightiest battleship. "They're moving toward the inner colonies," whispered her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb. "If they reach Earth." "They won't," Sarah said firmly, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The Defiant had been fighting a one-ship war for months, striking at enemy supply lines and isolated patrol groups. They had developed new tactics, pushing their experimental systems to limits their designers had never imagined. But for every alien ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Captain," Dr. Parr called from his science station, his voice tight with excitement. "I've been analyzing the gravitic signatures from their propulsion systems. I think I found something." Sarah moved to his console, studying the complex waveform patterns scrolling across his screen. "Explain, Doctor." "Their ships use a form of artificial gravity manipulation for both propulsion and structural integrity. It's incredibly efficient, but it has a weakness. The gravitational fields are synchronized across their entire fleet using quantum entanglement. If we could disrupt that synchronization, their ships would lose structural integrity," Sarah finished, understanding immediately. "How do we disrupt something like that?" Park's eyes gleamed with scientific fervor. "The dimensional phase shifter. We've been using it for stealth and evasion, but its quantum manipulation capabilities are far more powerful than we realized. If we could modify its output frequency and amplify it through the ship's main deflector array." "You're talking about turning our entire ship into a quantum weapon," Webb interjected. "The power requirements alone would overload every system we have." "Not necessarily," Park countered. "The phase shifter draws power directly from zero-point vacuum fluctuations. In theory, there's no upper limit to how much energy we can channel, but..." "But what?" Sarah demanded. "But channeling that much quantum energy through our systems would probably destroy the ship. And there's no guarantee it would even work." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. Through the observation windows, she could see the Kethmoran fleet moving inexorably toward humanity's core worlds. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and conventional weapons had proven utterly ineffective against the alien armada. How long would you need to modify the phase shifter? Assuming we could access the main engineering sections without being detected, maybe 12 hours, Park replied. "And what kind of range are we talking about?" "Unknown. The quantum cascade effect could theoretically propagate through the entangled field network indefinitely. It might affect just the local fleet, or he paused, clearly afraid to voice his speculation. Or it might affect their entire armada, Sarah finished. Across multiple star systems. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They were talking about a weapon that could potentially cripple an entire galactic invasion fleet with a single shot. But the cost would be their ship and everyone aboard it. I need to know if this will work, Doctor. No cieties, no mavis. Will it work? Park met her gaze steadily. Based on my analysis of their technology and our understanding of quantum mechanics, yes, it will work. But Sarah, he used her first name, abandoning military protocol in the gravity of the moment. We'll never know for sure until we try it. And we won't survive to see the results. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same grim determination in their faces that she felt in her heart. They were 200 people facing an armada of millions. By every logical calculation, they should surrender or run. But humanity had never been particularly logical when it came to protecting their own. Plot a course for the enemy fleet's center of mass, she ordered, and send a message to Fleet Command. Let them know what we're attempting. As the Defiant began moving toward what would almost certainly be its final battle, the crew worked with quiet efficiency to prepare their impossible gambit. In engineering, teams of specialists began the delicate work of reconfiguring the phase shifter, pushing human technology into realms their creators had never intended. And in the depths of space, Admiral Vexthul continued his inexorable advance, unaware that a single human vessel was about to challenge the fundamental assumptions upon which his empire had been built. The modification of the Defiance phase shifter took place in the belly of the ship, where Dr. Park and his team worked frantically among crackling energy conduits and quantum field generators. The dimensional phase shifter had originally been designed as an experimental stealth system, allowing the ship to briefly exist between quantum states to avoid detection. What they were attempting now was fundamentally different and infinitely more dangerous. Rerouting power from life support to the quantum matrix, called out Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked at a control panel that sparked and hummed with barely contained energy. We'll have maybe 30 minutes of air once we begin the cascade sequence. Park nodded grimly as he fine-tuned the quantum resonance frequencies. His hands moved with practiced precision, but his mind was racing through calculations that pushed the boundaries of human physics. The theory was sound, but theory and reality were often different things when dealing with forces that existed at the intersection of space, time, and probability. Dr. Park, came Captain Chin's voice over the intercom. Status report. Almost ready, Captain. The quantum field generators are operating at 200% of design specifications, and we've managed to create a stable resonance cascade that should propagate through any entangled quantum system it encounters. And the risks? Park hesitated before answering. Beyond complete destruction of our vessel, the quantum cascade could theoretically tear holes in local space-time. We might create a localized black hole or trigger a chain reaction that destabilizes the entire star system. There was a pause before Sarah's voice came back, steady and determined. Understood. How much longer? 10 minutes, Captain. On the bridge, Sarah watched the tactical display as the Defiant approached the heart of the Kethmoran fleet. They had been running silent, using their modified stealth systems to avoid detection, but that wouldn't last much longer. The alien vessels were spread across thousands of cubic kilometers, their massive hulls bristling with weapons capable of reducing planets to molten slag. Energy buildup detected, reported Webb from his tactical station. They're charging their primary weapons. I think they've spotted us. Sarah's jaw tightened. All hands, prepare for combat. This is what we came here to do. In the depths of space, Admiral Vexthul studied the tactical display with growing interest. His sensors had detected a single human vessel approaching the fleet's defensive perimeter, apparently intent on some kind of suicide attack. It was unusual behavior for humans, who generally preferred to retreat and regroup rather than engage in hopeless battles. A single ship? He asked his tactical coordinator. Yes, sir. configuration matches the vessel that has been harassing our supply lines, the one they called Defiant. Vexthal's mandibles clicked with amusement. After months of hit-and-run attacks, the humans had finally decided to make a direct assault. It was admirable in its way, though ultimately futile. A single vessel, no matter how advanced, could not threaten a fleet of this magnitude. "Let approach," he commanded. "I want to see what desperate gambit they have planned. Perhaps we can learn something about human psychology before we finish pacifying their species." The alien fleet held its formation as the Defiant accelerated toward them, its quantum engines pushing the ship far beyond its design limitations. Warning alarms sounded throughout the vessel as structural stress threatened to tear the hull apart, but the crew continued their work with grim determination. "Quantum cascade ready," Park reported, his voice tight with strain. "All systems are operating in the red, but the resonance matrix is stable." "Target the largest vessel," Sarah ordered. "If we're going to do this, we're taking their command ship with us." The Defiant streaked through the enemy formation like a silver arrow, dodging the first volley of alien weapons fire through a combination of skill, luck, and technology that bordered on the impossible. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids passed within meters of the hull, held at bay by quantum shields that flickered and sparked under the assault. 10 seconds to optimal range, Webb called out, his hands flying over his controls as he tried to keep their weapons locked onto the massive enemy flagship. The world render dominated the view screen, its obsidian hull stretching for kilometers in every direction. "Dr. Park, are you ready?" Sarah asked. "Quantum field generators at maximum output," Park replied from engineering. "Dimensional phase shifter reconfigured for cascade propagation." "Captain, once I activate this system, there's no turning back." Sarah looked around her bridge one last time, seeing the faces of the crew who had served with her for years. They all knew they were about to die, but none of them showed fear. Instead, she saw determination, pride, and something else that she recognized as uniquely human: the absolute refusal to go quietly into extinction. "All stations, this is the captain. In 10 seconds, we're going to show these invaders what happens when they threaten our home. It has been my honor to serve with each and every one of you." She paused, watching the seconds count down on her tactical display. "Dr. Park, activate the cascade." Deep in the ship's engineering section, Park's finger hovered over the activation control for a heartbeat that seemed to last forever. Then he pressed the button, and reality itself began to scream. The dimensional phase shifter engaged with a sound like the universe tearing apart. Energy that existed between the spaces of normal matter suddenly flooded into conventional space-time, creating quantum interference patterns that propagated outward at impossible speeds. The Defiant became a beacon of pure possibility, existing simultaneously in multiple quantum states as the modified phase shifter drew power from the zero-point field itself. Admiral Vexthal felt the first tremor in his ship's gravitational systems and frowned. His sensors were detecting some kind of exotic energy emission from the human vessel, but the readings made no sense. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Kethmoran databases, operating on principles that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. "Sir, we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations throughout the fleet," his tactical coordinator reported, his voice rising with alarm. "Something is interfering with our gravitational synchronization network." Before Vexthal could respond, the cascade reached the world render's quantum-entangled propulsion systems. The carefully maintained gravitational fields that held the massive vessel together began to fluctuate wildly as the quantum interference disrupted the entanglement network that synchronized them. "Emergency shutdown of all gravitational systems," Vexthal commanded, but it was already too late. The cascade effect propagated through the quantum entanglement network like a virus, jumping from ship to ship faster than light itself. Each vessel that fell victim to the interference became a new node for the cascade, amplifying and redirecting the quantum disruption to every other ship in the network. Throughout the Kethmoran fleet, impossible things began to happen. Massive battleships that had withstood the fires of 1,000 suns suddenly found their hulls buckling as gravitational fields fluctuated beyond all control. Smaller vessels were torn apart by tidal forces as their artificial gravity systems tried to pull in 17 different directions at once. The perfect formation that had conquered 17 galaxies dissolved into chaos as ships tumbled helplessly through space, their crews struggling desperately to regain control. And at the center of it all, the Defiant burned like a star as the quantum cascade consumed every system aboard the ship. The hull began to glow white-hot as exotic energies tore through the vessel's structure. But the crew remained at their stations, watching in awe as their impossible gambit actually worked. The cascade is propagating beyond the local fleet. Park shouted over the sound of screaming metal and crackling energy. It's following their quantum network across multiple star systems. Captain, I think we're affecting their entire invasion force. Sarah smiled grimly as she watched enemy vessels tumbling helplessly around them. The Defiant was coming apart at the molecular level, but they had done the impossible. They had stopped an armada that should have been unstoppable. The quantum cascade continued to spread through the entangled network that connected every ship in the Kethmoran armada, and for the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, Admiral Vexthal felt something he had never experienced before: defeat. The quantum cascade spread through the Kethmoran armada like wildfire through dry grass. Across 17 star systems, millions of vessels suddenly found themselves victims of their own technology as the entanglement network that had made their coordination possible became the instrument of their destruction. In the Rigel system, a 1,000-ship assault fleet preparing to bombard human colonies watched in horror as their flagship simply came apart, its hull plates separating like flower petals as gravitational forces pulled in impossible directions. Smaller vessels collided with each other as their navigation systems failed, creating cascading explosions that lit up the void. In the Vega system, Admiral Korthvex, commanding the siege of 3 human worlds suddenly, found himself aboard a ship that was trying to exist in several different dimensions simultaneously. The Doomhammer, a vessel that had personally destroyed over 100 civilizations, began phase-shifting uncontrollably between quantum states. Half the crew simply vanished as they were caught between dimensional barriers, while the ship's structure flickered in and out of normal space-time. But nowhere was the chaos more complete than at the heart of the invasion fleet, where Admiral Vexthal struggled to maintain command as his flagship tore itself apart around him. The Worldrender had been the pride of the Armada, a vessel so massive it carried its own gravitational field. Now, that same gravitational control system was killing the ship as quantum interference turned precise field manipulation into a storm of uncontrolled forces. Emergency evacuation protocols, Vexthal commanded, his 4 arms working frantically at his control station. All personnel to escape pods, immediate implementation. Sir, the escape pods are inoperable, his tactical coordinator reported, fear replacing the usual confidence in his voice. The gravitational fluctuations are preventing proper launch sequences. We're trapped. Through the chaos, Vexthal's 6 eyes fixed on the tactical display, showing the small human vessel at the center of the destruction. The Defiant was burning like a miniature sun, its hull glowing white-hot as the quantum energies it had unleashed consumed the ship from within. But somehow, impossibly, it was still intact, still broadcasting the quantum interference that was destroying his entire fleet. How is that vessel still functional? He demanded. Unknown, sir. The energy readings from their quantum emission source are beyond our ability to measure. They appear to be drawing power directly from the zero-point field itself. Vexthal stared at the display in a mixture of admiration and horror. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered a species willing to sacrifice themselves so completely for victory. The humans had turned a single ship into a weapon capable of crippling his entire armada, and they were paying for that victory with their lives. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Sarah Chun felt the deck plates buckling beneath her feet as the quantum cascade reached its peak intensity. The air itself seemed to shimmer and spark as exotic energies tore through the ship's structure, and she could see her crew's uniforms beginning to smoke from the heat. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. Rodriguez reported from engineering, her voice barely audible over the screaming of tortured metal. Quantum field generators are operating at 400% of maximum safe levels. Captain, we have maybe 2 minutes before complete structural collapse. Sarah nodded calmly, her hand steady on her command chair despite the chaos around her. Through the main view screen, she could see the massive Kethmoran vessels tumbling helplessly through space, their perfect formations reduced to scattered debris. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. "Dr. Park," she called out, "can you maintain the cascade for another minute?" "The quantum resonance is self-sustaining now," Park replied from his station, which was shooting sparks and trailing smoke. "Even after we're gone, the interference will continue propagating through their network for several more hours. Every ship they have in this galaxy, and probably several others, will be affected. And after that, their entanglement network will collapse completely. They'll have to rebuild their entire fleet coordination system from scratch, assuming any of their ships survive the cascade." Sarah smiled grimly. The Kethmoran Armada had conquered 17 galaxies through superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had never faced an enemy willing to turn their own strengths against them at the cost of their own destruction. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Prepare for final hull breach. It has been my honor to serve with the finest crew in the Federation. Our sacrifice here today will save billions of lives, and our species will remember what we've accomplished." As if in response to her words, the quantum cascade reached a critical resonance frequency, and the Defiant finally succumbed to the forces it had unleashed. The ship came apart in a spectacular display of light and energy, its hull dissolving into component atoms as the phase shifter's quantum field consumed the vessel that had housed it. But even in death, the Defiant's sacrifice continued to bear fruit. The quantum interference spread through the entanglement network like a plague, reaching ships in distant star systems and causing the same catastrophic failures that had destroyed the local fleet. Vessels that had been preparing to bombard human colonies suddenly found themselves powerless and drifting, their crews struggling desperately to prevent total structural collapse. In the command center on Luna, Admiral Torres watched in stunned amazement as the tactical display showed enemy fleet after enemy fleet going dark. Red indicators that had marked unstoppable alien armadas suddenly flickered and vanished, replaced by scattered debris fields and damaged ships broadcasting emergency signals. "What's happening out there?" she asked her aide, her voice hushed with disbelief. "Unknown, ma'am. We lost contact with the Defiant approximately 10 minutes ago, but every enemy formation in Federation space is reporting massive system failures. Long-range sensors are detecting similar disruptions in at least 6 other star systems." Torres felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized what Captain Chun and her crew had accomplished. A single ship, crewed by 200 brave souls, had somehow managed to cripple an invasion force that numbered in the millions. "Give me a fleet-wide communication channel," she ordered. "Every ship, every colony, every outpost." When the channel opened, Torres addressed her species with a voice that carried both grief and triumph. "This is Fleet Admiral Torres. The Kethmoran invasion force has been neutralized through the heroic sacrifice of the crew of the Defiant. Captain Sarah Chun and her crew have saved our civilization at the cost of their own lives." She paused, looking out at the tactical display, where the red dots marking enemy fleets continue to flicker and disappear. They will be remembered as long as humanity exists among the stars. Across human space, from the core worlds to the farthest colonies, people watched in wonder as the impossible happened. The alien armada that had seemed unstoppable was broken, its ships drifting helplessly through space or fleeing in panic toward the galaxy's edge. But perhaps most importantly, the quantum cascade had done more than destroy ships. It had shattered the Kethmoran Empire's greatest strategic advantage, their ability to coordinate vast fleets across galactic distances. The entanglement network that had connected their forces across 17 galaxies was collapsing, leaving isolated pockets of ships cut off from central command and unable to communicate with each other. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Kethmoran Armada was vulnerable, and humanity was about to show them what it meant to face a species that refused to surrender. In the weeks following the Defiant's sacrifice, the tide of war shifted dramatically across the galaxy. The Kethmoran Armada, once an unstoppable force of nature, found itself scattered and vulnerable for the first time in millennia. Their ships drifted in space like wounded beasts, their coordination networks shattered, their commanders cut off from central authority. Humanity, energized by their impossible victory, launched a counteroffensive that caught the aliens completely off guard. Federation fleets that had been retreating for months suddenly turned and struck at isolated enemy formations. The humans fought with a fury born of grief and hope, their tactics evolving rapidly as they learned to exploit the weaknesses in Kethmoran technology that the Defiant had revealed. Admiral Vexthal sat in the emergency command center aboard a commandeered cargo vessel, studying reports that defied all military logic. His mighty fleet was scattered across 17 star systems, most of his ships either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. Worse yet, the quantum cascade had somehow propagated back through their communication networks to the Kethmoran home galaxy, causing similar system failures throughout their core territories. Status report from the home fleet, he demanded of his surviving staff officers. Lieutenant Zektar, one of the few senior officers to survive the chaos aboard the World Render, consulted his damaged equipment with trembling hands. "Sir, communications remain sporadic, but we've received confirmation that the cascade effect reached our staging areas in the Magellanic Clouds. Over 70% of our reserve fleets are reporting critical system failures." Vexthal's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The humans had somehow managed to cripple not just the invasion force, but the entire Kethmoran military infrastructure. 3,000 years of conquest undone by a single desperate gambit from species they had dismissed as primitive. And our forces here in this galaxy? Approximately 12% of our vessels remain operational. Most are cut off from command networks and operating independently. The humans appear to be coordinating a systematic campaign to hunt down our isolated ships. As if summoned by their conversation, proximity alarms began sounding throughout their makeshift command center. Through the viewports, Vexthal could see the sleek shapes of human vessels approaching in attack formation. The Federation had learned to track Kethmoran ships by their unique gravitational signatures, turning the aliens' own technology against them once again. "Prepare for battle," Vexthal ordered, though he knew it was hopeless. His cargo ship was armed with nothing more than point defense systems, while the approaching human fleet included several of their largest battleships. The lead human vessel opened a communication channel, and Vexthal found himself face-to-face with a stern-looking human female wearing the insignia of a Federation admiral. "This is Admiral Rachel Torres of the Terran Federation," the human said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You are Admiral Vexthal of the Kethmoran Armada. Your invasion fleet has been destroyed, your empire's military infrastructure has collapsed, and your forces in this galaxy are being systematically eliminated. I am prepared to offer you a single opportunity for surrender." Vexthal studied the human's face, seeing something there that he had learned to recognize during months of warfare: the cold determination of a species that refused to accept defeat. The humans had proven they were willing to sacrifice everything for victory, and their technology had evolved with terrifying speed in response to the threat his people represented. "What terms do you offer?" he asked. "Complete withdrawal of all Kethmoran forces from this galaxy. Immediate cessation of all hostile activities against Federation worlds and allied species. Reparations for the colonies you destroyed to be paid in technology and resources. And full disclosure of your empire's territorial claims, so we know where other threatened species might need our assistance. And in return, your surviving personnel will be permitted to return to your home territories unharmed. We will provide technical assistance to repair your damaged vessels sufficiently for interstellar travel, and we will share our medical technology to treat your wounded. Vexthul was quiet for a long moment, considering options that all led to the same inevitable conclusion. His empire had been built on the principle of overwhelming superiority, but the humans had proven that even the mightiest force could be brought down by ingenuity, courage, and the willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice. "I accept your terms," he said finally. Admiral Torres nodded curtly. "Signal your remaining ships to stand down. Federation vessels will escort them to the galactic edge. And, Admiral, I want you to understand something. The crew of the Defiant died to stop your invasion, but they also died to save your people from something worse. If you had succeeded in conquering our galaxy, humanity would have eventually developed weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization. Captain Shun and her crew chose to end this war before it could escalate to that level." Vexthul felt a chill run through his body as he considered the implications of her words. The humans had demonstrated the ability to turn a single exploration vessel into a weapon capable of crippling an entire galactic fleet. What could they accomplish if they dedicated their entire industrial capacity to warfare? "We will remember their sacrifice," he said solemnly. In the months that followed, the last remnants of the Kethmoran invasion force departed the galaxy under Federation escort. The aliens kept their word, providing detailed intelligence about their empire's territorial holdings and identifying dozens of species that were under threat of conquest. Humanity, now aware of the broader galactic situation, began reaching out to these civilizations with offers of alliance and technological assistance. The quantum cascade technology developed by Dr. Park's team was carefully studied and refined, but never again deployed as a weapon. Instead, it became the foundation for a new generation of faster-than-light communication systems that allowed real-time coordination across galactic distances. The irony was not lost on Federation scientists that humanity's greatest weapon had been born from their desire to explore and understand the universe. On Earth, a memorial was erected to honor the crew of the Defiant. Captain Sarachin's final log entry was inscribed in letters of pure quantum crystal. "We are 200 souls facing an armada of millions. The odds are impossible, but we are human, and humans don't surrender when their families are threatened. Whatever happens next, remember that we chose to stand and fight." Years later, when Federation explorers reached the Kethmoran home galaxy, they found an empire in the process of fundamental transformation. The military caste that had ruled for millennia had been replaced by scientific councils and civilian governments. The species that had once conquered 17 galaxies was now dedicating its vast resources to research, exploration, and peaceful trade. Admiral Vexthul, now serving as an ambassador to the Federation, often spoke to mixed audiences of humans and Kethmoran about the lessons learned from their brief but devastating war. His favorite story was about a single human vessel that had accomplished something his entire armada could not. It had changed the course of galactic history through courage, sacrifice, and the refusal to accept the impossible. "The humans taught us something we had forgotten in 3,000 years of conquest," he would tell his audiences. "Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from destroying your enemy, but from showing them a better path forward." And in the depths of space, where the Defiant had made its final stand, a navigational beacon marked the coordinates where 200 humans had saved their civilization and transformed a galactic empire. The beacon's message was simple but profound. Here stood the crew of the Defiant. They gave their lives so that others might choose peace over conquest. May their sacrifice never be forgotten. The Kethmoran Armada had indeed conquered 17 galaxies, their advance seeming unstoppable until they encountered something they had never faced before, a species that measured victory not in worlds conquered, but in lives saved and civilizations preserved. In the end, it was humanity's greatest strength that stopped the unstoppable force. Not their weapons or their technology, but their absolute refusal to surrender when protecting those they loved. The galaxies had fallen before the Armada for 3,000 years, but a single human vessel had taught the universe that some things were worth any sacrifice, and that even the mightiest empire could be transformed by the power of courage and hope.